at AUC. When we arrived in 2017, Jillian was the kind, outgoing, and knowledgeable colleague who already had experience living in Cairo in the MENA region. And so anyway, she brought a lot of us rookies together and to start enjoying working and living together in Cairo. Indeed I have. Jillian is a professor of theater and the Associate Dean of HUS. Her research and creative work look at drama and theater as tools to build community, equality, and identity. She has developed applied theater projects across the world, including programs for persons living with brain injuries, victims of sexual trafficking, sexual assault, and climate change, and she has worked with companies to build community in the workplace. She has written numerous plays and articles, as well as 3 books, Acting Successful, Using Performance Skills in Everyday Life, that's from 2015, Western Theater in Global Contexts, Directing and Teaching Culturally Inclusive Drama Around the World, that's 2020, and then most recently, It's Not Your Fault, 5 new plays on sexual harassment in Egypt. She also delivered a TED Talk, that's pretty cool, giving a TED Talk, in Mumbai, where she worked in Film City and also ran a theater company, and she has produced the film The Puzzle Club and the Public Broadcasting Service, or PBS, television documentary, The Making of the Puzzle Club, which are used by hospitals worldwide to help trauma survivors. Her awards include the American College Theater Award at the John F. Kennedy Center, the PBS Independent Lens Award, the European Social Fund Award, and just last week, congratulations, Jillian, the Times Higher Education Award for Research Project of the Year in the area of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences for the MENA region. So, wow. That's great. Jillian holds a PhD from the University of Montana. She has 2 master's degrees, one from NYU and one from Chapman, and finally a BFA in acting from the California Institute of the Arts. Please join me in welcoming Jillian Campana to the podium.
Thank you, Mark. That was really nice. I'm so excited because I am the first person to get to use this really fancy piece of equipment, which I know is going to go wrong, so just bear with me when it does, because I don't know if you've seen this yet. High tech, right? I'm super excited, but it's a lot to juggle, this, and you all, so bear with me. I think it's really great that you gave that very lengthy introduction, because I think it's interesting to situate activism like this in the arts. And so I encourage you, as I'm talking, to kind of be thinking about your own life and maybe how you can think about the things that you hold dear, whether they're political or social or familial, and then the subjects that you're studying in school so that you can try to make a connection. You know, I think a lot of times we're studying academic processes and work, and then we're caring about things in our everyday life, and the two don't meet, and actually when they meet is the only thing that really matters. So as I'm talking about, you know, my own experiences with this particular issue, my own findings, and my passion for the arts, so for creating art and making that work and working with audiences to also appreciate this particular discipline, try to see if you can make any connections about your own work and the things that you're interested in. I think art is a very powerful tool to bring communities together and to get people to think about making changes in their own lives. It does something because we're able to look at the piece or listen to the piece or watch the piece, and it gives us a little bit of a break from kind of the assault of everyday life, because it's different, it's separate from us. It has usually some beautiful quality. Like, I'll show you some videos, and the videos are maybe distressing to watch in some moments because they're about sexual harassment, but at the same time, there's a high aesthetic quality to them. And then, of course, there's actors performing, so there's emotions that are being shown. And anytime that we tend to see someone experiencing an emotion, we very often feel it ourselves. So like there's this pretty powerful connection. But anyway, that's just some background. The focus of this topic is not really sexual harassment, but it's sexual harassment education. So there's, you know, we could talk about sexual harassment, but this is about education and I guess how it's a little different in the US than it is in Egypt, but shockingly, not that different. That's my big finding when Mark asked me to give this, when Dr. Dietz asked me to give this talk. Yes, it's working. Okay, so just we could talk about sexual harassment in Egypt for a really long time. And there's a lot of amendments to the penal code, including one that happened just last week, which is really, really incredible. But I just want to highlight 4. So in 2014, for the first time, the penal code defined and criminalized sexual harassment. Before that, rape was illegal, attempted rape was illegal, but other things were not. There wasn't really any kind of way to punish someone for any other sexual violence or sexual misconduct. 2014. It's really interesting. Be thinking about maybe why, because that's kind of like a big finding that I had. In 2020, so there's a big gap there. In 2020, there was a bill that was approved that protected the identities of women who report sexual crimes. So you can imagine if you cannot report something anonymously, I mean, you may not report it. Especially in a place like Egypt, where it's such a collectivistic communal society, that it's not just the repercussion for the individual who has maybe been the recipient of sexual harassment, but it's their family, it's their entire community. And so this anonymity is really important. In 2021, so just a year later, I mean, they're very quick, and hopefully we'll see a lot more now that we've got some power behind this. So there was just, so it's criminalized, there's punishment. The punishment consists of 2 things. It's time in jail, and it's also fines. And these are raised. So in 2021, they define it a little further. I think it's interesting. Sexual or lewd matters, suggestions, this is important, or hints. And then it increased the fine, and it increased the time in prison. And then just last week, on November 12th, was the last one. So Parliament toughened the penalty even more for crimes of sexual violence and increased fines for prison time and monetary fines. The highest fines right now are actually for perpetrating a crime upon someone in your own family. So let's look at the comparison. I actually don't think 1964 is that long ago. You may, because you're very young. But if you think about the time that human beings have been on this planet, and that, of course, sexual harassment has been happening, because it's existed since people existed, right? Because it's about power. So when someone doesn't have power, they need to try to get it, and sexual harassment is one way to do that. So 1964, that's pretty recent, actually, in my opinion. In 1964, we have the Civil Rights Act in the US, which outlaws discrimination. So discrimination in a lot of different areas. One of them is discrimination based upon sex. So at that point, it was really defined more in the workplace. It didn't really involve universities or schools very much. And it was more about who can have a job. But in 1972, we had Title IX come along. So does that name sound familiar to anyone? We have a Title IX office at the American University in Cairo, and it comes from this amendment. So it was a civil rights amendment to the act that prohibits the discrimination on the basis of sex in educational settings. And it initially involved, again, the right to go to school and the right to certain classes in a school, but discrimination is, if we look at it in a broader sense, if someone is being harassed, they're being discriminated against because they're unable to do the things that they want to be able to do and should be able to do. So harassment is a form of discrimination. In 1994, we have the Violence Against Women Act. And this is to prevent a lot of violence, including a lot of domestic violence against women. And then in the early 2000s in the US, we see institutions of higher education, colleges and universities, being mandated to provide sexual harassment training and prevention training to students, to staff, and to faculty. And that became a requirement in order to comply with both the Violence Against Women Act and Title IX. So the thing that I want us to take away from this, the similarities, two parts of shame here. We have shame on behalf of victims. This is everywhere in the world, including Egypt and the US. Victims of sexual harassment, victims of sexual violence often feel a great deal of shame. In Egypt, it's more communal, so it spreads to the larger family and the larger community. But there's also shame on behalf of perpetrators, which is a really weird thing to think about, and it's complicated. Think about the powerlessness that a lot of people, and young men and men in Egypt feel. When someone feels powerless, they retaliate often. They want to gain power. And they often do this through sexual harassment. It's the same in the US, although we see a little bit, it's not quite as gendered. It's still sexual harassment, tends to be more gendered here. When we think about power, and I recognize that's a very strange thing to say when men feel unempowered, but historically speaking, women have felt more unempowered throughout history, right? Men have had a lot more power. Some of that's being taken away right now because women are gaining power. And like, equality is really hard because equality means that one can't be better or have more power. So there's like this tug of war going on right here between shame of victims and perpetrators. Another thing that we see is the policies. So these policies, like for example, 2014, in Egypt, the first time that sexual harassment is criminalized, think about what was happening right before 2014. What was going on that probably had a lot of increase in incidents and forced the government to do something about it. So policy comes about when there are problems. So the revolution, lots and lots of sexual harassment, it could not be hidden any longer. All of a sudden, government went, whoa, we better do something about this. Let's start with this. Let's start by making a law. It's the same in the US. Women started to gain more power, sexual harassment became a known, the term was coined, sexual harassment, started in the workplace and then they saw that it expanded, and so the Title IX came in. So policies are happening in a response to incidents. Training, so institutions that are mandating training happens because there's a larger policy. So for example, any university or college that is accredited by a US organization or receives funding, like AUC, has to have training. So we have to do this training, but it's the same in every university. I know that when I was thinking about this and putting it together, I thought, that sounds so bad. Like we're responding because we have to, but isn't that the way we respond to most things? I mean, this is not really, to me, any different than a lot of other social issues. They gain attention people get upset by them, government says, let's do something, and then it starts to trickle down. So that's kind of interesting. Another similarity that we're not going to talk too much about, but we see a lot more in Egypt, but we also see in the US, is schools segregating according to gender to avoid sexual harassment. That is actually a tool, which is interesting to think about. So we have a lot of similarities. I want to show you, I'm going to show you 3 videos. They're very short, they're 4 minutes each. Has anyone seen any of these videos yet? Because we haven't really, yeah, I made you. We haven't shown these to a lot of students at AUC yet. This is going to replace the current Moodle training that some of you might have done on anti-sexual harassment. Has anybody done that training? Some of you probably had to, or you get emails occasionally that say you haven't done this training, you need to do it. It's text-based, it's on Moodle, it's about 2.5 hours long. It's very legal. You read it and then you try to answer questions and AUC tries to understand if you understand what sexual harassment is. So I've been working with a wonderful group of students and Rima Mograbi, who is the Title IX director at AUC, to create these videos. So these are now replacing the kind of word-based in English, these are in Arabic, training videos to help AUC students understand the issue. The 3 videos, the first one just seeks to show what the problem is. So it doesn't solve any problem. If we could solve the problem, I think we would, and we wouldn't have sexual harassment. Yay! Right? But we can't, it's not going to be solved. So this video is just to show us this is what it is. So I'll play it and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Let's see.
It went to the end.
Yeah.
Oh, it went to the end. This is what I need for.
No, you're fine.
Just press it, just play again.
Really? Yeah.
صباح الخير، أنا نورهان، والنهاردة هكلمكم عن الماركتنج استراتيجي وعن إيه ده؟ متشيكين قوي النهاردة ولا إيه؟ بس عندي برزنتيشن مهمة مضطرة. بجد؟ لا إن شاء الله تعملي حاجة.
هاي بس انتي بدري.
ما الطريق كان فاضي قلت أجي بدري.
اوكي احنا خلاص بنخلص.
يوه لسه بتذاكروا.
بس يعني we're finishing up. 5 دقايق مثلا.
دقيقتين.
تمام.
استناك بره.
اوكي هقابلك بره.
صباح الخير شيخ. صباح الفل. عندك ماتش النهارده؟ لا تمرين النهارده. هستناك. هجيلك.
ماشي، عموما دي الكونتاكت انفورميشن بتاعتي، يعني لو في قابلتها تتصل بيا.
ماشي شكرا. هاي. بس كنت عايزه اسال لو الكورسز دي موجوده في السكولرشيب.
انت لو عايزه كويس سكولرشيبس، الكويس ده كويس قوي.
فندم بس حضرتك تيجي سنة شمال عشان مش شايف. ايوه بس كده.
طبعا ولا ايه؟
دينا؟ احنا اصحاب من زمان.
تخصك يعني تحاول الشرطه.
ايه الهبل اللي انت بتقوله ده؟
بس البنت جامده قوي الصراحه، انا ممكنك. الكويس ده كويس قوي.
ايه ده تمام.
بنت خالتي دخلته وقالت لي ان هو كويس لذيذ قوي.
اوكي.
استنى اجيبها لك.
سلام.
ايه اللي انتوا بتعملوه؟ اقف هنا.
ايه اللي حصل بس يا فندم؟ ايه اللي حصل؟
يا نورهان يا نورهان في ايه؟ قلت له يقف فين؟ مش عايزه امشي كل ده. هو ايه اللي مش عايزه امشي كل ده؟ هو انت ما شفتيش كان بحلق فيا ازاي من اول ما ركبنا؟ ما طبيعي يعني يا نورهان. ما على فكره ما حبكتش تنزلي عريان كده، احنا في الشارع. في ايه يا نورهان؟ نورهان انا بتكلم على فكره.
خدها في حته رايقه كده وادلع نفسي.
ايه القرف اللي انت بتقوله ده؟
خد بس تعالى.
مش عارف ممكن اعمل ساين اب اونلاين وقرر.
لا وساين اب قلنا لي ما تساين اب هنا. انت هتمشي؟
لازم امشي اروح اشوف اخويا. صباح الخير. أنا نورهان.
So that's the first video. I think we can get back this way. Where's the Anyone who knows that. Again,
صباح الخير.
juggling
أنا
too
نورهان.
much.
صباح الخير. أنا نورهان.
We'll hopefully someone want to go get him. He's the guy who does all this stuff. Fuad! Dr. Dietz, thank you. So that kind of gives you a general idea. We worked for a year to create these videos, and we worked with students. Because the number one way to have anti-sexual harassment training be appropriate for a community is for the community to create it itself. So, I'm a middle-aged American woman. I'm not going to be able to create great anti-sexual harassment training for AUC students, but AUC students can do that. So we work with a group of Tomorrow's Leaders scholars, a group of film and theater students, some recent alumni, to come up with kind of what are the scenarios. Let's try to narrow this down. We can't cover everything. Let's focus on just a few little types of things. Yeah, it works.
صباح الخير. أنا نورهان.
There we go. Yay! I knew it was more trouble than it's worth. Technology. So anyway, we're trying to show the problem, and we're trying to have the students be involved in showcasing the problem. Other universities have done very similar things. This is a particular university. I don't know if anyone kind of recognizes. It's a very famous university in the U.S. and California. It's Stanford. And in 2015, like AUC in 2020, there was a really big case where a young woman who was an alumni was raped behind a dumpster after a fraternity party. It was only caught because two guys were walking by on their way home, and they saw her being raped. And they grabbed the guy, his name is Brock Turner, and they held him down, and she got to the hospital. And it was a very, very high-profile case. He was an athlete, a well-known student, freshman, very well connected. He got 6 months in jail. And at his hearing, he talked about what a painful process this had been for him because it had interrupted his studies. The woman who was raped went by Jane Doe for years. She didn't want her name. Again, think about shame. She didn't want her name to be connected to this, but then she finally realized that by connecting her name, she would be able to evoke some change. And so she wrote a book, Know My Name, this is her name. Chanel Miller. And Stanford really changed a lot about their policies as a result of this case. It's not ideal. They should have done it before, of course, right? But they didn't. This case got them to make a lot of changes. And the changes that they made, they threw a lot of money at it. They expanded a lot of programs. They created new support systems. They created an actual space for women to go to, or men to go to, who had had crimes perpetrated upon them. And then they engaged the students in the process. So still, Stanford uses students to teach students. This is the most effective way to train people. Training is a weird word. We could say educate, but in some cases, training implies practicing behaviors rather than just getting the information. So their training involves things like role play, so that people can understand how to combat this issue if they see it happen. If they see a crime being perpetrated, they can maybe step in. So another university that I want to highlight is the University of Montana. This is where I came, this is where I moved from to come to AUC this time. In 2012, there were something like 300, and this is a town of 70,000 people. There were something like 300 sexual assaults in the town. The number seems really high. I'm sure it's that. I'm sure it's that. I'm sure it's quite high in Cairo too. There were 2 cases that were very big because they involved student athletes. Again, 2 football players who were really, really well known and popular. And then one was a foreign exchange student who attempted rape and then also raped a young woman. And the university, the provost for international programs, alerted the student that the 2 women who had been, one had been raped, one had attempted rape, had gone to the university to talk about what had happened, and they alerted this man and he fled the country. So the university was under tremendous pressure, and just like Stanford was kind of in the national limelight, just like AUC in 2020. So what they did was they had to have a complete overhaul, of all of their processes. So they actually commissioned an independent review. So they had someone come in and look at their anti-sexual harassment and anti-sexual assault processes and help them change it. So they changed how complaints were handled. They have, just like AUC, incoming classes do this training, but they have to redo it their junior year. And they have orientation workshops where they show plays, because drama has been understood to be a very effective medium in getting people to understand content that maybe they're uncomfortable with, because it's a way to look at something that's fictional, even though it's real, but it's distant, so it's fictional. And so it provides this gap in an audience's ability to understand an issue. They can see something that's separate from themselves, and then maybe by seeing something that's separate, they can then think a little bit about how it may affect or be prevalent in their life. And then they do an annual survey with students. So every year they ask students, not just questions about the anti-sexual harassment training, but their experiences with sexual harassment and assault on campus. So this is the way that this particular institution is handled. Then we have AUC. In 2020, when AUC made international news because of the Ahmed Bassem Zaki case, AUC instituted a lot of different practices. It was very quiet before that. It existed, but it was nothing that was large scale. And again, just like Stanford, just like the University of Montana, just like the US, just like Egypt, governments, they're responding after something has already happened and brought it to everyone's attention. So in 2020, you know, we saw, of course, the AUC student, Nadine Ashraf, who started with assault police. Harassment becomes a more used entity to locate places where harassment is happening in Cairo. We see AUC introduce this mandatory anti-sexual harassment training. And then my colleague, Dr. Dina Amin, and I work with students to write several plays. The plays that were performed in 2020, the title of all 5 of the plays is Mish Zambik, It's Not Your Fault. That's the book over there, AUC Press, shout out to them for coming. But, you know, AUC published these plays and commentary about sexual harassment at AUC, which is a brave thing to do, and in Egypt in general. And the book is in English and the book is in Arabic. And the plays are not just free. Usually a playwright writes a play, they charge money, it's called royalties. But these are free because we want anyone to use them, and they're adaptable. So we want schools in other places. We want schools and universities in Morocco and Tunisia, in the UAE, in Dallas, Texas, to take these plays and adapt them for their context, but to use them as a basis. So we see that AUC has done a lot of very similar things. I think there's another video. So this is the second video. And the first one really is just locating the problem, defining it. So again, if you can think back to when you had to take that anti-sexual harassment training on Moodle, which was probably a long time ago, and probably some of you avoided it, but it didn't really define the problem. And it didn't really offer any ways to change it. The second video is redefining the problem, and it's showing small moments for people to think about how they could speak up. So that's I'm not even going to make it big. Could we though, is there a way to make it a little louder? Yeah? Yeah. Could you do that? Yeah. Did you all feel that it was a little quiet? Feedback? It was okay. Okay.
It's the highest.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll watch this. We're going to keep it small.
I think you're fighting each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll just leave it.
Okay. Should I?
Expand it.
All right.
No.
I'm not going to expand it.
إذا ابتديت أوردرتي؟ لا خليك عندك، أنا هجيلك بدل ما تطلعي. دي بس ثانية. عامل ازيك؟ ممكن بس تيجي تخلي بالك من حاجتي؟ أنا راجعة على طول.
بس كنت عاوزك في كده.
You wanted to stop it, right?
No, I wanted to make it big.
You wanted to end it?
I wanted to make it bigger.
Oh, bigger.
Yeah.
إذا ابتديت أوردرتي؟ لا خليك عندك، أنا هجيلك بدل ما تطلعي. دي بس ثانية. عامل ازيك؟ ممكن بس تيجي تخلي بالك من حاجتي؟ أنا راجعة على طول.
بس كنت عاوزك في كلمة واحدة.
بس مش وقت لما أرجع.
طبعا هتتحججي لي وتقولي لي شغل.
انت بتحاول تتحكم في كل حاجة؟
هاي انا بس بالصدفه سمعت المسج اللي كانت جوه لك شايف المفروض اي حد يعني يكلمني بالاسلوب ده خالص الانفورميشن بتاعتي عشان لو في ابديتس هنا في الكوميونتي اللي بتبعتي
هاي.
حضرتك يا فندم لو تيجي سنة شمال بس عشان مش شايف. ايوه بس كده.
هو بيعمل ايه؟ يوه لسه بتذاكروا. طب ما يلا.
بس خلاص we're wrapping up.
دقيقتين.
تمام.
استناك بره.
اوكي هقابلك بره. هتعرف تكمل لوحدك؟
تبعك
دينا؟ احنا اصحاب من زمان.
تخصك يعني بتحاول تشوطها ولا حاجه بس
ايه الهبل اللي انت بتقوله ده؟
بس البنت جامده قوي انا لو مكانك هاخدها في في حته رايقه كده وادلع نفسي. انت لو عايزه كويس في السكولرشيب الكويس ده كويس. استنى يا جماعه.
مش انا ينفع اعمل ساين اب اونلاين؟
لا لا ساين اب اونلاين ساين اب.
انت بتعمل ايه؟
كنت بجيب لك القلم.
لا انت لمستني.
لمستك؟ اكيد ما كانش قصدي.
اقف هنا حالا.
ليه يا فندم ايه اللي حصل؟
هتمثل، احنا شايفينك وانت بتحلق فيها طول الطريق.
انا ما عملتش حاجه.
اتحرشت بيا.
انتوا هتبقوا عليا ولا ايه؟ ربنا على المفتري يا شيخ. ربنا على المفتري.
هو انت بجد قلت كده؟ ما تظبط يا ياسر.
في ايه يا عم مالك مهزر؟
ده ما اسموش هزار، ده اسمه تحرش، لو حد عارف ممكن يعمل لك مشكله.
اللي هو ازاي يعني؟
حبيبي يلا ممكن نمشي دقيقتين خلصوا.
اه يا عم.
الو.
معلش يعني الصوره اللي انت بعتها لي دي بعتها بالغلط ولا مش دي حبيبه؟
ايه يا حبيبي يا برو؟ ايه رايك؟
انت اتجننت يا عم انت ولا ضارب حاجه ولا ايه حكايتك؟ انت ازاي تعمل فيها كده؟ انت ازاي اصلا تبعت لي حاجه زي كده؟
يا ابني بدل ما تقولي شكرا
اوعى تكون بعت الصوره دي لحد تاني. انت تسجيلك فيها.
تسجلني عشان بعت لك صوره يا عم اطلع افوار.
افوره؟
لا كان قصدك ولا شفتك؟
انا غلطان يعني كنت بحاول اساعد.
انت تحرش وانت عارف كده كويس.
تحرش؟ لا انا هسيبكم بقى في الهبل بتاعكم ده، انا اصلا محتاج امشي.
كنت عايز اقول لك شكرا.
على ايه؟ دي اقل حاجه.
بص على ده كده يا عمرو، يعني يمكن تفهم.
انت كويسه؟
بجد شكرا.
So when students see the first video, then they'll go through a training and they'll talk about what they saw in the first video and they'll look for moments of intervention or potential intervention, and then they'll see the second video. The second video is very, very similar. We wanted it to be this exact same scenarios, we wanted it to be the same characters, but you notice how, you know, in the Uber scene, which we call Swift, because we're not allowed to call it Uber, but in that Uber scene, you know, her friend tells her that she shouldn't be dressed that way in the first video. What do you expect? And in the second video, she stands up for her. So that's an example of how to be a bystander, how to intervene in one moment. You can't do anything about the Uber driver, but you can do something about supporting someone else. Same thing with the, you know, the guy who went and played squash and threw his racket. He got really angry. He felt he couldn't do anything. And in the second one, he called the guy out. So, you know, small moments of intervention. Let's see if I can get back. There we go. Yes! No! Go away! Yes! All right, so what makes anti-sexual harassment training efficacious? A lot of it is not. There's a lot of studies out there that show that training, and especially mandatory training, doesn't do anything to make people more likely to report and doesn't do anything to stop people from perpetrating such a crime. But there are a few things that we have found in a lot of surveys, both here at AUC that we've done and in the US. So it's about who creates the training, it's about what the training focuses on, and it's about how it's delivered. So who creates the training? When it's created by an external entity, it doesn't seem to make a difference. When it's created by the community itself, and the issue is addressed in a cultural context, it seems to make a difference. The language is very important. The language, you know, these are the first videos in Arabic for university, for young people. There are videos for the workplace in Arabic, but there aren't for training purposes for young people. So it's important to have them be in Arabic. That was feedback that we got from every student that we talked to. You can't really have a dramatization in English about a cultural context in Egypt. It doesn't make sense. And then putting the students as the experts, making sure that the students themselves tell us about the problem. I'm just going to go for like 5 more minutes. Get something to eat if you're hungry. What does the training focus on? When training focuses on blaming and telling, and a particular group like men, bad, it doesn't work. So we're not placing blame on any one person or on any one group or on any gender. It's important not to do that. When training focuses on solving a problem, it doesn't seem to work because it's not realistic. And when it focuses on protecting the institution, so it becomes a legal process rather than an educational process, it doesn't have any impact. When it focuses on teaching people to be strong bystanders, calling someone out when they see it. Because when a person's being harassed, even if it's what may seemingly feel like a small thing, they don't really feel empowered to do anything about it. But the person next to them may. Changing the culture. So not changing an individual, but changing the entire culture. Increasing awareness, just defining the problem. Recognizing the problem, I guess defining the problem is very similar to increasing awareness. These are all things that these videos are trying to do. And then the last thing is, how does the training work? So when it's mandatory, it doesn't tend to be as strong, so these videos are not mandatory. When it's text-based, so when it's written, reading something and then answering questions, it doesn't seem to make a difference. You're already doing a lot of that. And when there's a test, it doesn't seem to make a difference. When it's performative, so again, this idea of having a performance that's fictionalized, one can watch that performance and be critical of the behaviors. You can watch these videos and think about, for example, the girl in the first video who says to her friend, you shouldn't be dressed like that. You can be critical, you can say she shouldn't do that, and then you might go, oh, and I shouldn't do that as well. So you're extrapolating from a fictional situation to bring it into real life. Role play. When role play is involved, when people can actually perform certain behaviors, whether they're the behaviors of a bystander or a perpetrator, they learn from that. So, if we were to do something else, we would have students, like yourselves, act out some of these scenes. There's a lot to be learned from that. There's a lot to play the perpetrator, a lot to be learned from playing the perpetrator as well. Because that's something that we often try not to step into the shoes of the villain. We like to step into the shoes of the hero. That's really great. We don't learn as much. When we step into the shoes of a villain, we learn how their mind works. And we learn why they perform certain behaviors. And then we can not perform those behaviors in our lives. And when the training is inclusive and adaptive. So again, with these scripts that we wrote, we came up with scenarios, and then we worked with actors, and we got feedback from the actors. And many times the actors said, I don't like this line. This isn't believable. I wouldn't do this in this situation. And then we changed it. And this is the first year of these videos, so hopefully we'll learn from them, and we'll get feedback, and then the next ones will be adaptive as well, and be able to include more people. So that kind of gives you a general background. I'm going to skip the third video for the sake of time, even though it's really great. If you're interested in seeing it, come talk to me and I'll try to figure out a way to show it to you. The takeaways. Sexually violent crimes don't really look different in Egypt and the US. People do it for the same reason, and it's the same type of crimes. Anti-sexual harassment training is worth it, even though sometimes it doesn't work, but if it's done right, it does. It gets people to reject rape myths, and we use the term rape myths, but we could use it for any kind of harassment. She asked for it, right? She wanted me to look at her. She wanted me to do this. the training that helps bystanders become active is efficacious, and really good training reduces victim blaming. And then the big takeaway is just what sexual harassment is in the first place. Any unwanted sexual or sexually suggestive conduct. And if you don't know what that is, then don't do it. It's as simple as that. The last thing that I have is just some resources. So if you're curious and you want to take a photo of this, these are some great resources, including the last one is the AUC reporting channel, which is really better than it was a year ago. They get a lot of students to report. So if there's one takeaway that you have from this, my hope is that if you see it happening, stand up for the person who's experiencing it. And if it happens to you, report it. There's an anonymous channel to report now. And that's not not every institution does that, and it's very difficult to report anonymously in Egypt, but you can report anonymously at AUC, and it's something we're very proud of. So, thank you very much. I appreciate that you stayed until right now, and I'm happy to take questions if you want to stay a little bit longer, and for those of you who want to stay even beyond, I can show that last video. Thanks.
Thank you, Jillian. Are there questions? Comments, thoughts?
Me?
Like, I understand that making something mandatory takes away from like the impact it has, but I think that making like this video mandatory to watch is kind of essential for it to get to the target audience. So like, how are they going to reach its audience if it's not mandatory?
So she's asking, how will you get it out? So actually, every freshman who comes to AUC now in the spring will see all of these. But they'll see them in a big train at their orientation. So rather than this is mandatory, go home and watch this and then answer questions, it's more integrated into the orientation experience. So anyone could leave. It's not mandatory in that it's punitive if it's not followed through, but it's, you know, it's more integrated into the university orientation in general. And I would say that the thing that I personally think about videos, you may feel similarly or you may disagree, but a short video, it's 4 minutes long, and I think they're pretty good. Like, I think the acting is good. It's your students, these are all students. 2 of them just graduated. But you know, so like, you're gonna see them like walking around. So our hope is that people will watch them not because they have to, but because they want to, because they're pretty good. So we're trying to take away from this idea of mandatory and instead make it something that people actually would want to do. Any other questions or thoughts?
I have a few. So first of all, it seems like most of these scenarios were a scenario where it was a stranger. What about scenarios where it's a known person? I'm assuming that sexual harassment can happen between people who know each other as well. The other thing that I was thinking was, man, if I was a young guy, I would be a little confused about how to express interest or attraction to a woman.
Yeah, that's great. We've gotten some of that feedback too. We've gotten questions about why is it males as the perpetrator. And we did for a while, we considered having a female be a perpetrator, but then we looked at the statistics, particularly in Egypt. It's really rare. I don't know if that comes as a surprise to you, and I don't want to offend anybody, but especially in Egypt, it's just women aren't, for the most part, doing this. We did for a while have a scene in a gym where a guy was working out, and a female student was saying, you know, like flirting inappropriately with him. We're like, that's just not believable at all. Someone's gonna laugh. So, but it's something that we've thought about. And then, yeah, I think the most confusing one, and the reason we included We want to have conversation. And so if the videos are all straightforward, like we all know rape is sexual assault. Everybody knows that. What we don't know is staring. Staring is a very common thing. Staring can be considered sexual harassment. I'm staring at a lot of you right now. I'm sorry if I'm making you uncomfortable. But staring is, you know, something where the line is really, really kind of iffy. Or touch. When the man touches her back. We talked about that, guys, for hours. Where can he touch? And where's the actor comfortable with him touching? And then we got feedback on, like, you know, why is it the woman in the hijab that he's touching? But then we said, she's the only one that right away speaks up and says, what are you doing? So they are intentionally designed to provoke conversation and to provoke students against thinking the same thing. We want students who want, and these are, by the way, 4 students. We want to make some separate ones for staff, separate ones for faculty. The audience that is watching the video needs to feel connected to it. And so, obviously, we can't make the same videos for the same groups of people, but we want people to disagree. We want them to start conversations so that, you know, someone goes, oh, I didn't realize that that would maybe be considered inappropriate for me to do. And maybe as a result, they'll And we tried with a lot of these scenarios. For example, the scene in the classroom where the young man is, you know, he's talking about the female friend, but he's really harassing the guy. So he is harassing his friend. His friend is really uncomfortable with this guy's behavior, and he doesn't know what to do about it. So, but yeah, they're not perfect, but they're not supposed to be. We didn't want to try to solve the problem. If people can watch these and talk and note moments that are problematic and then talk about what they would do that would be better, then I think it serves its purpose a little bit more because it sticks with people. You know, when you see a movie or you know, you see a movie and you didn't like it, you loved it but you hated the ending, you talk about it for a while. So anything that's perfect, we kind of like experience and forget. But things that are imperfect, they stick with us a little bit longer. Yeah?
Yeah, I have a question. So when we talk about harassment, I always ask myself how to prove it. Because the problem here in Egypt is every time you say that someone harassed you, prove it. I didn't do it to you. Like the video we saw. Like, you know, I didn't stare at you, I didn't look at you, I didn't touch you. So I know maybe there is no answer for this question. So how to prove it, or is there any criteria how to articulate the complaint?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's very, very difficult to prove unless someone sees it happening. Some bystander sees it happening. In other cases that I showed, like we could look at the AUC case of Ahmed Bassem Zaki, 93 accusations. 93. And I think 3 of them he was found guilty of. So it's very, very difficult to prove. But I think what's also really efficacious is being to report it in the first place. In the 3rd video that's about reporting, it's the same scenarios, same exact thing, but in every case, they call up Uber, they report it to Uber. One just reports it to a friend, because there's informal reporting too. There are times where something happens and you can't take it to a formal entity. Maybe a person doesn't feel comfortable doing it, but they can tell a parent, they can tell a friend, they can tell someone, and there's a lot of power in being able to do that. The more likely that if it happens again, they'll actually take it to a further level. And then, you know, how to prove it? I think in the AUC system, when incidents are reported, they go to the Office of Institutional Equity in the Title IX and they investigate it. So there is an investigation. Sometimes the investigation doesn't go far, but sometimes the investigation goes quite far. There isn't a perfect answer for that one either, though. But I think there's a lot of merit in just reporting for the sake of acknowledging that it's happened. And if we don't report, then it's almost like, did it really happen? And then you start to work things around in your mind. Am I wrong? Am I to blame? But once you report it, you're saying, no, I didn't do something wrong. So there's power in that. Yeah.
So can you talk about the challenges that you went through, you and your team, while you're creating those videos? And I do applaud you, and I agree that this meets the mandatory training that we have on Moodle. It is far more effective, in my point of view. So what are the challenges that happen when these videos are created? Can you talk about it?
I mean, they took a lot of time to make. There were a lot of challenges, but they were really great challenges because we learned from them and we adapted. Now the challenge is just getting them out there. That's the challenge. So we're using them in small groups. A lot of freshmen have seen these, and a lot of people in the dorms, and all of the RAs have worked with them. But we haven't been able to get it out to, like, I would love them to be, broadly speaking, I would love everyone to have access to them. I think that would be really powerful. And there's some challenges around that, just because, you know, it's a tough issue, and they're not perfect. And if someone sees them out of context and doesn't understand that they're for training purposes, it could actually, you know, go the opposite way. So that's really the challenges. I'm here if you have more questions. Yeah, but I think you also have to go.
Another question.
Thank you. I'll answer your question now.
One final announcement. Yeah, everybody's free to go. We're going to actually have another panel with Dr. Campana on it a week from today that will include Humanities and Yasmin as well. And so that's another CASAR event. We have another CASAR event tomorrow on the Gaza War in the Jamil building, also during the assembly hour. So thanks, great to see you all. Have a great day.
And Mark, I forgot to mention that AUC Press is here with this book.
AUC Press is here selling the book as well, so please buy the book if you can.
Okay, I do love the question. Answer the question.
Check. All right.
I have a question. You mentioned that.
اصلا ما بنزلت بطريقتي استني عشان اقفل اقفلي سلام
ممكن بس تستخدم
بس عايز
مش وقت وانا بس
بقى زي كل مره. طب فين هعمل ريجستر واكلمك يلا باليوم.
انت بتحاول تتحكم في كل حاجه؟
ممكن بس تيجي شمال سنة عشان مش شايف حتة صغيرة بس. أيوة.
كريم يوم ما واتش زي اصلا.
لا 5 دقايق مثلا.
كريم دقيقتين.
اوكي ماشي.
خليك بره.
اوكي.
ماشي؟
انت لو عايزه كويس في السكول الشيب الكويس ده كويس قوي. استنى هنا.
اقف هنا.
كده في نص الشارع ايه اللي حصل ده بقى؟
احنا شايفينك كنت ماشيه فين طول الطريق.
انا ما عملتش حاجه. باين عليك بنت مهووسه صحيح.
يا بنتي اللي مهووسه اتحرشت بيا.
حرشت مين يا حبيبتي؟ انتوا هتبقوا عليا ولا ايه؟ انا راجل متجوز على فكره.
طبعا.
احنا اصحاب من زمان.
بس هي جامده. انا مكانك هاخدها حته رايقه كده.
عمرو معلش ممكن تفهمني ايه الكلام ده؟ انت اتجننت بقى.
طب مش انا ممكن اعمل ساين اب اونلاين؟
لا وتعملي صح والله ليه ما تعملي صح هنا.
انت بتعمل ايه؟
انا كنت بديكي القلم.
لا انت لمستني.
لمستك؟ اكيد ما كانش قصدي.
بقول لك ايه، هاتي موبايلك انا هعمل له ريبورت. صدقني خلاص مش لازم تفتحي، مش هتطفي، افتحيه لو سمحتي.
هو انت بجد قلت كده؟ ما تظبط يا ياسر.
في ايه يا عم مالك بهزر؟
ده ما اسموش هزار، ده اسمه تحرش، ولو حد عرف ممكن يعمل لك مشكله.
ايه يعني؟
في ايه صوتكم عالي قوي؟
ما فيش حاجه، احنا بنتكلم عن حاجه في الاساينمنت بس.
انا بحكي لك بعدين.
كريم ما تقولهاش حاجه. كريم ما تقولهاش حاجه.
ازيك حبيبي؟ انا شادي. هو انت في الجامعه؟
لا انت تقصد انا شفتك.
على فكره بس انا كنت بحاول اسالك.
انت تحرش وانت عارف كده كويس.
تحرش؟ لا انا هسيبكم بقى في الهبل بتاعكم ده. انا اصلا محتاج امشي.
تمشي تروح فين؟ تعالى هنا انا بكلمك. انا محتاجه اشتكيه، بس انا حتى ما اعرفش اسمه. الحيوان حاول يديني رقم. انا عمري ما عملت كده قبل كده، ممكن تساعديني؟ اكيد طبعا. الو؟
خدمة العملاء ساعدك ازاي؟
ايوه لو سمحت كنت عايزه ابلغ عن وقع تحرش.
أنا آسف على اللي حصل النهارده ده. ما كانش قصدي أضايق أي حد.
طب ايه؟ مش هتقولي لي اللي حصل؟
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really.
Thank you. Thank you for staying and watching the last one.
That was really great. Thank you so much.